The fintech space moves fast and security needs to keep up. This next panel shows how that's done. In scaling security in fintech, we have our esteemed experts Ashwat Kumar, Prajal Kulkarni, and Nasim Haldar, with moderation by Ankur Bhargava. Please give a huge round of applause to our panelist and moderator.
Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Anand, for keeping it not very boring. I think it was fantastic panel. And then we have people who are still woken up before lunch. So thank you for that. Fantastic panel. Uh, so talking about fintech scale and security, I think these are three keywords we're going to talk about, and this is what is the panel discussion about. And to represent, I think we have a fantastic panel today. I think we have people who are heading security for biggest stockbrokers in country today, fastest growing payment gateways, and fastest growing fintech companies. I will hand it over to them to have a small brief introduction about themselves, and then we'll start. So I'll introduce myself first. I am Ankur, and I work as a head of product security at PhonePe. Before this, I have handled again two more startups. I think the Flipkart and CureFit, and most of my time now has been with Indian startups. Right. So here it is.
Hi, I'm Ashwat. I head security currently at Razorpay. It's a good familiar crowd, and I've been with Razorpay about 4 years. And prior to Razorpay, I was with Synopsys and did a lot of consulting work with a lot of banks, a lot of Southeast Asian companies. Prior to that, I was with Microsoft. I was there for another 6 years. That was based out of Redmond. So that's my history.
Morning, guys. My name is Prajal. I've been with a bunch of companies in my early days of my career, but I would focus more where my hustle has been, which is with Flipkart, where we shared our career together. And now I head the security at Grow.
So myself Nasim Haldar. I started my career with defense and then slowly move into corporate. And I'm into this, fintech and insurtech for last almost 7-8 years now. That's all about me.
So if you notice, all of them have come from a different background and probably now working for fintech, and that's where we'll start from, right? So if you talk to, let's say, Ashwat, he came from a consulting background, moving to fintech, Badal from e-commerce, and Nasim has been from probably insurtech to fintech. So when you moved to fintech from your previous experiences, what has been your biggest key challenge? We'll start with you, Ashwat.
Yeah, so I've worked with banks before, but not really fintechs, right? So banks, you have to check everything, like you'll have to do all the checks, but with maybe 15% of the manpower and 15% of the tool cost, right? So that's where the challenge comes in. So a lot of open source, lot of innovation, and now how exactly do we kind of manage speed, innovation, and also have all of the checks in place. I think that's where the trick is. Or that's what keeps my life interesting. So to put it in a better way.
So from Flipkart to Grow, e-commerce plays in a different ballgame altogether. It's still a startup, security, speed, all those keywords matter at Flipkart. But then what has changed when you move to actual fintech?
Yeah, Ankur, as you said, with Flipkart, both of us shared a very long time, and now the entire space for me is changed at the moment. I would like to talk about commonality. I see a lot of tech stack is very similar. People mindset quite similar. What has changed is primarily there is a big boss now, where is regulating you. You're supposed to adhere to certain timelines, certain guidelines, etc. And that kind of builds up a paranoia for most of the people working in that ecosystem. Like, you can't have that luxury of going with the same speed and agility and not thinking about security and compliance. So that is one of the difference that I see, which is across my ecosystem. I would I'm sure you guys will also resonate. That's there. Compliance has become one of the most important drivers of trust and security within the company.
What do you Naseem? I think insurtech and fintech, how similar are these?
See, I would say my challenge become my motivation over time. So when I believe all of we can resonate, right? Probably 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we want to open an account, we want to buy an insurance policy, we want to get a loan. At least it will take at least a week or 10 days. Today we can get it done in 2 days, 3 days, right? So this is the challenge and this is the motivation as well, right? You have to do things with a scale, with a speed. I believe this is one thing, and sometimes I feel the challenge is that scaling, speed, and depth. These three things, managing these three pillar in a right balance. This is one of the big challenge. I believe everybody can resonate these three things.
I totally agree. I think, and very joint. These are the keywords you look for when you're running in a company, right? There have been cases where there were fintech companies, and after running for 2 or 3 years, when somebody has joined, that was still day one in security, right? And what's the biggest challenge, Naseem? I think you've been part of most fintech companies as compared to us. What has been the day one for you in security?
See, earlier, I would say when I started my journey in fintech, I have seen, security is probably a problem for Q4 or Series B problem. Now, one thing is very clear to all the founders that security should be a feature of your product because you are building a product for the trust of the people, right? If your product trust has been compromised, or I think Pajjal has already talked about the big daddies, so they are also there. So I'd say the big daddies should be a kind of a collaborator for you who can vouch for your product. If there is a green signal from your big daddies, you will actually going to use this green signal as your marketing scheme as well, and these things will also help you to grow because at the same time, if you see all these regulators, they have a access to probably 11,000 NBFCs, 50 60s, insurance companies probably 10,000 more, broking, insurance, all the investment firm, they have the data points, right? If they are coming up with something, we probably need to be little more careful about their insights, and let's see how we can do it. Probably all that thing is not applicable to every tech stack. We have to be little choosy. At the same time, we also need to understand the business. And I believe today, even I always introduce one terms wherever I go. I call it MVS, minimum viable security. So if anything, if my MSVs are there, product has always go ahead from my end. They don't need to come for a formal go ahead. You think about your product, any product manager or any product, if you just tell them that, dude, you want that your product got failed due to this 4 5 reason. If you just build that psychology inside them, our work is much more easier.
Got it. I think we have one of our big daddies sitting here. Okay. So, question to you, Naseem, again. I mean, uh, what do you do in your company or previous companies where security is actually foundational and it's not an afterthought? What processes you have basically chosen there?
Let's take example probably from my past organization, right? Insurance is a product where nobody willing to buy. Even today, if I probably raise a hand, okay, how many people are there? Around 20, 30 people are there. Just I'm all our security gig, I understand. How many of we are having a probably antivirus in our mobile phone? Can you raise your hand? See, this is the percentage. And this is the problem. The basics, even all of we know what is the value of an antivirus. And I would say in our phone itself, if you see, we carry everything, right? We carry our identity, we carry our bank balance, we carry everything. And still we are not secure.
I mean, are you happy less people have it, or are you happy more people won't have it?
See, I believe I'm happy if I consider if I consider that my job is more demanding.
Sure, got it.
Moderator is having good fun here.
Yeah, and I want to make sure people have fun. So yeah, that's okay. I think one of the keywords we were looking at is scale, right? And by scale in a startup, we mean less and less manual processes, right? Ashwat, this question is for you. Um, what are your thoughts on automation? How have you, probably from your day one till now, what has changed in Razorpay, and how much automation you have done, and how have it actually helped you reduce cost or scale the product?
So I think at least I'm huge on automation, right? The big thing is how do you check all of the boxes, right? So if you take like an application security lifecycle, it starts with early in the lifecycle of threat modeling. Then you move on to something like SAST during the coding. Then there is like the test, and finally once it's done, you finally open it up. And if somebody wants to do like a bug bounty, right? So if you move traditionally along the lifecycle. I'll come back to vibe coding in a bit, but I see Anant laughing. But so in each of these four boxes, it's very important to have automation. So we use like a Gen AI based product right in the for threat modeling, right in the conceptualization and design phase. That's where it becomes super critical, because if if you come back to coding, then product would have kind of washed off their hands, right? They would have moved on to the next one. So you need to tackle it while the product is being conceptualized, and while the conversations are going on, to see how exactly you bring one is the regulation in place. To say, for example, let's take PCI for example, right? How do we ensure the credit cards are only flowing through limited systems, through only like the card data environment, and ensuring that hey, I'm also thinking about when I'm moving to a different geography, like the different regulations for that particular geography and all of those pieces, right? That needs to happen very early in the life cycle. And it's impossible to kind of move with like 50 or 60 product managers to have 1:50, because it's very difficult, right? They're like, okay, don't slow my job. Whereas if they have some kind of a chat bot, or, if there is some kind of a tool which goes and provides live feedback, then it's very very useful for them, and that's kind of what we have built in place. And we use multiple tools along the way to check this. And also one other place where automation has come in really handy is to go beat the developers when they don't fix issues. We go block the pipeline, right, so that they cannot check in code.
You could bully.
Yeah, we've done it, man. It actually works, right? So I must thank my ex-manager Hilal, who's here, who played a major role. But yeah, it's that actually plays a huge role, because otherwise things will never get fixed.
I agree. I agree. So, Puzzle, what are your thoughts on this? I will not bring build versus buy discussion. I think we've been doing this for last 10 years. Every panel discussion has that. So we'll not focus on build versus buy. But then there's a new concept which has come up, and we've seen recently all the Indian startups which are working for solving security. They started doing design partnerships, right? And I totally agree that this is sort of a win-win for every one of us, that we have security problems which we want to solve, and they have an idea which probably aligns with what we are trying to do, and why can't we just collaborate and solve for the community later on, right? So what are your thoughts on that, and how do we probably go ahead after this?
So, if you asked me this question maybe 7 8 years before, I have definitely would have a different answer. I was a little skeptical about doing design partnership back in maybe 2014 16. That's our common time at Flipkart, because when we used to evaluate tooling, most of that was Western tooling, and the big names in like say source code security, cloud, or any identity security, most of them were Western toolings, right? And difficult to do like a design partnership, even if they are willing to do, because there's a time difference, thought process different, the territory is different. It's very precarious here. How we do development, speed, agility definition for us is very different for Western startup ecosystem. So now, cut to post COVID specifically, I'm very happy the surge of Indian security startups which have come in, and specifically the product based security startups, right? Lot of value add, and that value add has resonated with us also in terms of how we can leverage these startups to do like design partnership and figure out the problems that we have at our home, to work with them to solve it. Because if I had to solve something on the lines of giving an example, say code security with GitHub Advance or big names like Sneak, Checkmarks, It will be an off-the-shelf pick deploy. Deployment will be like there will be a implementation partner, implementation partner, who would understand maybe 60% of the product, and then I would sail with them for good 6-7 months to see the final output. If I'm buying a product, say in January, and if I'm seeing September, the actual output of the product, I'm losing half the year, right? And whereas if I do like a security partnership with a startup, I know my requirements very well. They will be able to work with me as if they are an extended security arm of my company. And I've seen at least with 2 such instances, not taking names again, but then they've been able to solve the requirements that we had very beautifully. The ROI is fantastic, and I'm very happy again that Indian startups have been able to reach at a scale that they understand your requirement as an Indian company, and then they can mold your requirements around it. Now I feel it is a win-win situation. Some example is one of the company which got acquired few years back, and they've been a multi-bagger in terms of acquisition. They work with us in design partnership.
Yeah, I think, and
Just one more data point there, right? But and post the 6 months, if things don't get fixed, then you'll have to pay like $250 an hour to some some American guy or some Singaporean guy who comes in, and it's a painful process, right, to actually see value out of it, because there's some edge cases or something where the value out of the product will not be coming out. So post the 6 months, it takes like close to a year to see actual value amount of products. Right? Just one data.
And I mean, to add to that, I think we've seen infrastructure in India built in a different fashion altogether, right? The core businesses or values we, I think, have worked in Indian startups have been very different from US market. And when you see a lot of commercial tools which are made in US, Israel, or something else, I think um, very less of them actually consider the regulatory requirements we have or specifically made for India, right? I think in previous discussion we have seen that how India is different and how government is actually building that infrastructure for us. So in that sense, making these partnerships, helping Indian startups grow, makes more sense. And I think few of us have been able to do it and have been successful in doing that. So kudos to you guys. And talking to regulators, governance, I think one thing which I want to mention is I think Indian regulators have done a fantastic job in making sure things are secure. I take an example of SEBI, RBI, the way regulations is working, the way they are beating up people for not doing certain things. I think this is making sure India by default in terms of security in fintech is really, really strong, right? And taking that examples, I think where do you see regulators helping or sort of sometimes not helping, because this is something which slows down security. If you consider something which is mandated from day one, so if somebody has to start a fintech startup today, right, there's something which is bare minimum security, minimum viable security, which they have to deal from day one. How have you guys dealt with it? So we probably talk to Brazil first.
So as you said, right, definitely kudos to all the regulators in India. They have thought about each and every guideline very, very deeply. I kind of get surprised most of the times with SEBI specifically, the way they think about security for just the stockbroker ecosystem, not just for the company, but also the supply chain ecosystem. How are you dealing with the supply chain vendors? What kind of data that you are sharing? How are you securing them? Vice versa, right? Because going to that extent, this is like level 2 of data security. That is where I feel most of the regulators have been doing very well, because if we can do whatever we can do in our house, but what about when the data leaves our house, right? That's where most of the breaches you come in the news and see. These are not because of inherent problems in the company, but then when you share it outside, that's where you lose control. And a regulator specifically thinking about that specific aspect of security. I think that is a win for me. And your question around MVP, I think most of the guidelines that you see, they have been like gold standards. Like earlier, we used to be very fascinated about NIST and other American guidelines. But if you pick up any regulator in Indian ecosystem and see their guidelines, they have detailed out most of the aspects of security. You're sorted there. To start any Indian financial company, if you're coming in from scratch, they can pick up the guidelines and see that they are very, very verbose in nature.
Yeah, I think we'll over to you, Nasim. I think there be sometimes requirements where regulators have asked us to become antiviruses. I mean, they look at the circulars, and if you see some line which is written, let's say, you should know what all other apps do we have on the phone, or you should know if they have a malware in the phone, and you deal with that particular thing on from your phone itself, from your app. How do you deal with this? Because sometimes our product team or business teams will not be aligned with all these requirements coming up. They don't understand the reason regulators are asking for all those requirements. How do you deal with this as an inside thing? I think, how do you convince product or business that we have to do this?
Yeah, see, nowadays I believe security more like a ride of a shotgun, not like a catch and play game. I think what Pajal has already talked about, probably Savvy CSARF about the S-bomb side of things, right? So those things are earlier. It was little fascinating to e-commerce, insurtech, fintech. Only those people are actually maintaining those things, right? As on date, it's a regulatory requirement. uh, the challenge you are saying that sometime product or business people not aligned to few things. See, there are two ways to handle it. One way, much more discussion based, that you explain them, they try to understand. And as on date, regulator, they want more audit friendly. I would say, sometimes we CISOs are giving recommendation. I would say don't give recommendation. Give them the problem statement. Hey, this is what this is the expectation from the regulator. Now you tell me how you're going to fulfill this thing. This feature should be in your product. If you give this statement, there will be, I have seen, 70-80% cases are solved. The second thing is that you have, your hard hand. Hey, if you don't do that, I'm not going to, say okay. And if you want to go ahead without my okay, please go ahead. I know that board and other business team will get stuck. I think Ashwat was also telling. I think Hilal also helped. So this is these are the two main way to handle it. And nowadays regulators is very smart. Earlier, I have seen regulators done audits or inspection mostly checklist based. Now they don't do. What they does, one of my past company I have seen, they want to review a SOC system. They ask, okay, sir, which tool you use? Tell me your tool name and all the details. They ask us to, share our scheme who has admin access of our SIEM solution, and they give the access somebody remotely near their team. And before giving the access, they ask, so now we are recording the scheme. If something goes wrong from this point, it's our responsibility. We're not responsible. And the person who is actually reviewing the same tool, he has worked on that same tool for last 10 years. He has not asked a single one or two question. He knows what is the problem of this tool. He directly went there, take a screenshot and ask, how you are dealing with this problem. This is the way regulator has enhanced. So I literally feel nowadays regulators are much more understanding. If you tell them that, hey, this is my problem, this is what I am taking, filing this problem for probably 2 days, you have give me 2 days extension, they literally allow you. But you might be give to you solid justification. And if I probably take example of RBI, the biggest solid team of Rabbit, you had a discussion with these people, you had a discussion with their seaside team, you literally get lot of good insights. They are not authoritative, they are also helping.
I agree. I mean, because they have audited a lot of fintechs in India. They probably know meta-analysis, how people have actually solved these issues, spread in a different company or a different perspective. And they've been letting probably help us in terms of how do you deal with the situation if you have any problem. But Ashwat, I think over to you.
Just one add-on point there, right? I think the regulators are upping the bar also. So, for example, they come to Razorpay, they look at a few good practices, then they suggest a few good practices from OnPay and so on, right? So it's a good cross-cultural thing as well. And for somebody who's starting up, right, in a fintech space, the one good thing today is bar is already so high. So one is, they can start building security while they start designing the product versus it being an afterthought, which makes life, it's a little bit difficult in the start, but at least, the foundations are good, then it makes adding on very
Just
easy.
to add, his point, or probably I just vouch with the data point. Earlier, if all of we are going for a probably ISO certification, ISO 27001 certification or SOC 2 certification, literally you need to do a implementation and then you will get the certification. If you are a regulated body, like let's see the example, if I take example of CSCRF or probably RBI ITGRC guidelines, you follow these guidelines, believe me, day one you are ISO ready, right? Or probably SOC 2 ready, or probably for sure, more than 80-85% you are ready. Probably some documentation, some way of representation need to be done. So that is how they have. So now our regulator, our standard, our guidelines actually top of international guidelines.
I agree. And that's where the next question comes. I think, Ashwat, you've been one of the Indian fintech startups which have probably launched products outside India. Right? Most of us are still dealing with Indian regulators. What are your thoughts? How are you handling global auditors? I think is most of the things similar, or do you have to do something more?
So, let me start with the good parts first, right? So, or rather, the easy parts were, since the bar was already so high, from like a Rabbit perspective, uh, we were kind of okay going international. Like what we've done is we've taken the whole infra, made it into like a cell from like an AWS concept, right? So taken that cell and deployed it in like a different country. So Singapore as an example. So that was like the easy part, and take like the whole cell, drop it there, and it has to have like local hosting and so on. Then comes the interesting parts, which are a little more tricky, is the data localization or the region specific pieces, right? So what happens if a particular person is a citizen of Singapore and he's in Singapore? Then it's straightforward. What if the Singaporean citizen travels to, let's say, India? Do they go to the Indian entity or do they go to the Singapore entity? That's where the routing logic becomes very tricky. Do you store the routing data in India? Do you store the routing data in Singapore? And how exactly does the routing happen and so on? And that's where a lot of time has to be spent. But the good piece is, once you do it for one particular region, become very easy, as you move on to other regions. The main tricky piece is around the data localization. But the other pieces around the security bar, or for example, in Singapore, it's MAS. The security pieces are mostly kind of okay, because Revit itself has such a high bar.
Sure. So when you say you only consider savvy, is it containing RA backend services, front-end services, security tuning around it? So is this everything in to move though?
Yeah, everything has to be moved there. Okay. Uh, in some countries, it's a little more relaxed, but at least in Singapore, where there's a data localization requirement, there it has to be done.
Sure. And then bit of W.
Yeah. So if the other thing while we were figuring out was, how do you run like for example, antivirus has to run on the containers as well, right? So for the lack of a better word, the runtime piece. So where exactly do you put the mothership of that particular piece? And there has to be like a database activity monitoring solution. Where do you put the mothership for that? So those are some of the trick pieces, and we have been able to solve for that. But it is a little costly, but yeah, we were able to solve for it.
Drop. And with all the regulations we have, I think the biggest keyword which comes up with that is trust, right? And when you talk about trust, Prasol, the question is for you. how do you bring that trust in probably two ways? One is we have to be able to bring that trust in our regulators that this is something in terms of principally we are trying to solve, right? We're not trying to shy away from regulators, so that trust we have to bring with all the regulators we have. Another question of it is that we need to have that trust built in for our users. How do you meet that perception with our users that we are somebody who's taking security very seriously, and how do you tackle that?
So, in my career journey, the word user trust I learned from my Flipkart co-founder, and I used to see that we had a um, Gmail group called as Chatter, remember, and a lot of time customer query escalations used to come on this Chatter group, and the way people used to empathize and show compassion towards customer queries was next level, and that kind of percolated from one of the founders of Flipkart. That's why I kind of understood what user trust building is and why it is important, because when you are trying to sell something to a Indian consumer, I think the first thing that Indian consumer looks at is how can I trust this brand, right? And building that trust takes a lot of energy and effort. I kind of understood what it meant back in Flipkart, and in a lot of the same cultural aspect kind of percolated to where I work now, and I see the same thing resonated here as well. But it's a different ballgame though. Now you're dealing with people's money, and to kind of also give majority that you are dealing with something top class and your money is secure or PIR data is secure, that energy is differing than what an e-commerce efforts for user trust toward. Here it is next level paranoia. One incident and the user trust is gone out of the window, right? So the kind of efforts that we put, especially in marketing, branding, user trust, even educating. I think one of the questions in a previous panel was how do you educate and have a responsibility model shared with Indian consumers as well, right? That effort was also putting. So what we make sure users are aware what is your responsibility, security responsibility, and what we also do, right? As a platform, what kind of efforts we take to secure your data and money. That kind of builds the whole narrative and branding around user trust. At the end of the day, we can do best what we know, right? There are always efforts we put, and sometimes a lot of we will see there will be some mistakes that we do here and there. But then again, how do you play around, make sure that still those efforts are put in place to rebuild that trust? That is also another area where I feel a lot of the fintechs have worked really well. And also regulators, they have guidelines to even educate us how we can share these informations with our users, how we can use the same thing in our platform to market it, etc. So a lot of that helps in the user trust building.
But how do you keep the regulators happy? How do you make sure they trust you in terms of what you're doing?
So see, there's always the tech part, Ankur, which we can go in full detail how we build security from grounds up, bake it into every system, service, etc. Right? But there's always one aspect where why do you trust big brands like say maybe this thinking Google or Apple or Microsoft, like these companies have it's not like they've not faltered, right? There are like 2010 Google security attack. Microsoft went through a lot of them, still goes. But then how these companies have still been able to build that user trust is definitely an area of research. And think about it, like it's not just the tech. I'm sure they put a lot of energy in the tech, making sure they are secure, but also the brand building part of trust. That is fantastic, and that an aspect I feel a lot of fintech companies in India, they've started using that to build that user trust.
Sure. I think before we have Drizzle Nuts, all the people who are on phone can now ask questions, and then we'll come to one out of stars it on them.
Hi,
Thank you so much. I mean, it was very insightful. And I was just a general question, right? So, what I really want to understand is like, in your opinion, like, what is important, prevention or detection, and why? I mean, why is one preferred over the another?
Ashwat, you should answer first.
He and I have done. So for people who don't know, Hilal was my ex-boss. He and I have gone back and forth and this multiple times, and it never ended well. So can I let you guys talk first?
Sure. I think more than prevention and prevention and protection. I feel discovery over my primary things like identification of what I'm protecting, right? Once we have the lay of the land, we figure out what I'm protecting, how am I protecting, makes it easier. So
I would say it's a clever English.
The prevention controls versus detection controls. We want to be very why.
If I answer, it's more like egg or chicken kind of situation, right? You cannot do detection. You cannot do prevention without detection, and the other way around, right? So it's simultaneously should go together. There will be cases where you can configure certain preventive control, but if you literally don't know what is what rightly Pajala said, that how you are discovering and how you are going to detect, then probably prevention will be limited. You cannot able to have a full-fledged prevention, although full-fledged prevention is not possible.
Take it. Director subtitle whatever. Site visibility America. Upper title.
Definitely, yes. Yes. Yeah.
So I have a question from my favorite topic, which is around visibility. We talked about visibility. There's supply chain, which everyone is now talking about. SBAM is another concept that is there. The question that I have is, how confident are you about your network or your environment's visibility right now on, say, a scale of 1 to 100?
Why not?
So I'm going to answer this question. You know, right? You are a moderator in the previous panel. You said you are here in personal capacity. You should not answer questions related to the time. So you should be careful. This is a tricky one.
We can answer in terms of how confident we are in our home network, not at our office network.
Let's start with that.
So I believe in my home, I don't know if anybody is there. I think Hilal Bhai was there in some time or some sense of my home. Hilal Bhai has seen mostly smart home. So I have created a dedicated AWS account, a VPN, and all these things I have created. So I believe out of 10, at least 7, 8, I can say that I have visibility in my home network.
It's an interesting one, but I'm just no, I speak very generally about it. In spirit, the whole supply chain SBOM, I'm game for it, right? It's fantastic. And knowing what you use, what are the ingredients of it, is a very noble thought. Now, in reality, it is difficult to kind of understand everything that you own, right? Including your tech stack if it's proprietary in nature. It's a very difficult ball game. Like I'm sure on your phone, do you know all the apps? Would you know what are the any libraries which have been used? I'm sure that will be no, right?
Even add to him, even if you're proprietary, if it's, I would say, in-house built, still you will get a lot of visibilities. The problem started when you have an integration with something, probably you have not built it, right? Or probably you have outsourced, or probably you have an integration with those systems. That is full SaaS. Again, you can get at least a legal control or a legal cushion, you will get it. But the problem is like, you are taking some services or some part of the services from some other software service provider. They are saying, I'm doing this, and you requested some features, some upgrade, some customization. They have done something, and literally you have zero visibility what is going on. Other side of it, that literally cannot have the visibility. Like, right now, probably I cannot see what is going in my behind. So it will be always some blind spot.
So I'll take a stab, right? I'll be the brave one and take a stab. So if you, at least in my head, it's split into 3 different buckets. One bucket is, let's say, my code, whatever third-party libraries it calls. So that I think we have decent visibility, right? So for example, on GitHub, this depend produces a lot of noise. We found a way to kind of reduce the noise, right? So then the second bucket is, let's say I use a software. The software imports like other libraries and so on. There, the visibility is partial because there are ways through the container runtime where you can hook on and kind of identify what libraries are there. So the third, or rather, there's a third piece where in the front end, there's a lot of SDKs that get used. So this is an underlooked area, right? So I can tell you from a live example where we got a HackerOne report. The root cause of that particular vulnerability was because of a marketing SDK that we were using. It's a very well-known marketing SDK. So then luckily I could get in touch with one of their VPs based out of the US. And he was like, he absolutely did it. 24 hours later, he really thanked me for it. Right, but so that's the third bucket where there is potentially like a lot of holes, right? The SDK is like a third piece, and the fourth piece is whatever data you send out, that is going to be difficult, right? So at least
I still can't man that brave and be auditor. I can skip the question with that.
Ankur is unfair, man. You know, it's all the hard questions. Any more questions, guys?
Ankur. A great panel, firstly. My question is I think most of the security folks always face this problem is the conversation with the board that happens, wherein we always try to convince them that, hey, this is very important for us, but the budgetary allocations are very limited for security folks. Now, of course, the regulations have come out and they are in much support of the CISOs or implementing security controls in place. Now, how is the mindset shift that has happened when you see 5 years before how it was and how it is now today in terms of the board's mindset right now, like in terms of security? Are they still supportive of it, or are they doing it just because regulations are saying this, or we just had an incident, so let's invest in this space? And Gobi, you should pick this.
+1.
What you guys are doing hyper soon, hopefully. Okay, so I think when you talk about board has a very close relation with, let's say, and we're talking about startups, most of us not listed startups as of now, right? So when you talk about board, it is more to do with investors, the deal with them, right? They understand where we are, which domain we are, what sort of regulations we offer. And if you talk about investors now, the moment a new investor comes and joins the board or a company, we understand how much sort of due diligence is going to happen, right? And this has been a very, very common practice these days. All the bigger board investors have actually done a great job in doing the due diligences and all the companies. And they have started realizing that when you spend money on something which is insecure, the money can actually fall, right? So I think in terms of startup security and board, if you talk about these keywords, this is where I am, I think, and they understand this very, very closely now.
If I probably add little bit to whatever Anku has said, see, both are I'd say it's a two part, right? One is your management, your top management. Another part is your independent directors. So your top managements are responsible to build the asset and secure the asset, and your independent directors are responsible to making sure the governance process are appropriate. So if you see both the things, end goal is securing the asset, whatever you are building, and how quickly you can build. In an unsecure manner, you cannot do scaling. So combination of both the things, I think investment not a big challenge. At least for fintech, insurtech, if I talk about, not a big challenge.
And just one more data point, right? Like the independent board members that Nasim was mentioning, usually if you observe across the different companies, a lot of people who come in from the advisory board, right? So there's usually like an advisory board which is independent from the investors. Advisory board usually contains a lot of members who are governors or very senior people from like the banks who have just retired or so on, or chairmen of banks and so on. So they bring in a lot of the practices from the banks as well, or the regulatory bodies. So that way, a lot of that flavor also.
Any more questions or?
So I had a question in terms of product security architecture or the whole development life cycle that goes on. So for a startup company, while we have the privilege to start from the design phase or the from initial requirements discussion phase itself, we can embed security, right? So in that case, how do you approach the development cycle, and maybe what are some more like key points that we will have to take care of in the initial requirements and the design phase itself, and what would be a approximate kind of timeline that we can expect from for a product to get to a certain maturity level. So what is the track that we might have to take care of for that? Maybe some
You have
insights
your
on
own
that.
product?
No,
Oh.
not my own.
I think it's a bigger question. Yeah, probably we can discuss this offline. This is something which, yeah. This has a very big answer. There's no.
Yeah, maybe like 3 months. If I have to put like a line on the sand, right? Maybe over 3 months is
Cool. We'll have a quick closing notes. So, what is that one takeaway you want to give people? Two questions probably. One is, somebody is starting in a new venture in fintech space. What is that advice you will give them? That from day one, this is what you should do so that you don't worry about certain things later on. So, what is that one key takeaway you want to give, specifically in fintech industry? I think.
For me, for fintech, I always say this thing that security is a feature of your product. Consider at the first phase, not like that, we'll take it later. If it's not secure enough, you are not going to scale. Whatever product you are going to build, how good it is, it does not matter.
One thing would be have problem solving skill set embedded for every developer, which also involves security. That is, I feel
It's a nice
a lot of
perspective.
times I'll elaborate a lot on this, but then security problem solving is just security engineer's problem, not a developer's problem. But if you start with a very small team of development, having that problem solving skill set embedded also with developer is a win-win situation.
Yeah, two pieces. The most important one is figure out what circulars are applicable to you, right? Especially, it is a little bit not really complex. It can be convoluted because sometimes, there's a confusion there. So, spend time there. And number two is adding on to what Prajal mentioned, right? Like building at least the base platforms, have them in place. So that way, you don't have to do re-architecture and you don't have to re-architect, especially in the infra and while designing the application.
Got it. Thank you, everyone. I think we have time for more questions. No, okay, sure. So we'll take them offline. We're here anyways. Thank you all of you for joining.